Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to be exploring the massive, profound philosophical frameworks of an ancient Buddhist text called the Mahaprajnaparamita Sastra. And we're charting a journey here, starting from just basic, everyday empathy all the way up to literal, ultimate omniscience. It's a text that doesn't just ask, what does it mean to be a good person, but rather, what does it mean to be fundamentally, cosmically awake? So, right off the bat, the text hits us with this super relatable metaphor. Imagine your own children are trapped in a dark prison. What would you do? If you work to just get them out, to free them from that darkness, well, that represents pity, the active removal of suffering. But what if you don't just free them, but you give them ultimate joy, like a massive feast and a beautiful life afterwards? That is mercy. It perfectly sets up our foundation, drawing a hard line between doing the bare minimum and offering true, boundless care.
And what's absolutely fascinating here is how this concept takes our normal, everyday empathy and just elevates it into something completely cosmic. It establishes great compassion as the literal root of the entire enlightened path. We aren't talking about just giving someone a temporary smile or, a quick fix. We're talking about fundamentally altering reality to completely eradicate suffering and replace it with absolute, unconditional joy.
So the big takeaway here is that there's a massive, massive gap between small compassion and great compassion. Ordinary folks like us, or even early practitioners on a spiritual path, we might just feel really bad for someone who's hurting. Small compassion basically looks at a deep wound and offers a band-aid. But a fully enlightened being, they take immense, tangible action to permanently remove that suffering. Great compassion is this unstoppable, reality-altering force. To really drive home just how extreme great compassion is, the text brings up the famous story of King Sibi. To save one single dove from a hawk, he didn't just shoo the hawk away. No, he literally carved the flesh off his own body to trade for the dove's life. It's a level of self-sacrifice that, according to the text, literally shakes the earth and moves the oceans. It's a pretty visceral reminder of what unconditional actually looks like. Now, all this extreme sacrifice begs a really good question. If gaining ultimate wisdom is the whole point of enlightenment, why is compassion celebrated so much more? Well, the text explains it beautifully. Profound wisdom is really hard to swallow. It's like this bitter medicine that aggressively strips away your illusions. But compassion? That's the sweet remedy that everyone universally loves. Wisdom requires some really deep, uncomfortable introspection, whereas compassion is just a language that every living thing instinctively understands.
As we ascend higher on this path, a bodhisattva, which is a being striving for full awakening, has to navigate a completely chaotic web of existence. It is not a straight, easy road. The text actually categorizes this journey into these massive, intricate lists, noting exactly 162 distinct worldly and unworldly routes. Think about that number. It's staggering, and it represents the infinite, messy complexities of life, karma, and the human mind.
But here's the thing. A true master doesn't get bogged down in all those numbers. Instead, they develop what the text calls the knowledge of paths. This is the incredibly precise wisdom needed to navigate and deeply understand every single one of those 162 diverse paths of existence. They can walk right into this complex, chaotic maze purely to guide other beings out of it without ever actually getting trapped in the maze themselves.
So how do they avoid getting trapped? Think of it like this metaphor from the text. When a kalpa, which is an unfathomably long eon, reaches its end and burns away, absolutely everything just becomes empty space. Despite the illusion of those hundreds of different worldly paths we just talked about, they all ultimately dissolve into the one true path of emptiness. The master sees the maze, but they know the walls aren't actually real. Okay, here is where the philosophy takes a really mind-bending turn. The text distinguishes between two types of ultimate knowledge. You have general omniscience, which is knowing the basic, total nature of suffering. That's what a standard awakened sage has. But then you have specific omniscience, and this is the absolute, exclusive territory of a Buddha. A Buddha knows the exact origin, the precise karmic result, and the microscopic detail of every single thing in the entire universe, all at the exact same time. The text actually uses a pretty funny analogy to describe a lesser sage's wisdom compared to a Buddha's specific omniscience. It's like a lamp that's lit during the bright daytime. I mean, sure, they officially have the title of omniscience, and yeah, technically the lamp is glowing. But put it up against the blinding sun of a Buddha's total awareness, that lesser lamp really doesn't have any actual illuminating power.
And that brings us to one of my absolute favorite concepts in this whole explainer, affliction residue. This perfectly explains human nature. Have you ever wondered why even great leaders, or maybe you yourself after learning a really hard lesson, still hold on to some bad or just weird habits? Well, even for highly enlightened beings who have totally conquered their inner demons, the core fault might be gone, but a residue, a sort of leftover habit, still remains.
To explain this, the text offers this brilliant metaphor. Imagine a nursing mother's garment that has been scrubbed completely clean with ash. The fabric itself is perfectly pure, the stain is 100% gone, but the smell of the milk still lingers. It's the same with people. A person can be completely washed clean of all their inner evils, yet they still carry the lingering scent of their old, quirky behaviors from past lifetimes.
And get this, the text actually calls out specific famous sages who kept some really funny habits from their past lives. It mentions one highly realized master who literally couldn't stop jumping over furniture and clothes racks because, well, he used to be a monkey in a past life. Another sage, because of some leftover anger, would just impulsively spit out his food. And another would literally chew his cud after eating because he had spent so many past lives as a cow. They were fully enlightened, but that residue definitely stuck around.
So, what's the actual difference at the very top of the spiritual ladder? Well, a lesser sage's wisdom is like a small campfire. It successfully burns the wood of ignorance, sure, but it leaves behind the ash of those quirky habits and affliction residues. But a Buddha's wisdom? That is a cosmic, world-ending fire. It burns so incredibly hot that it vaporizes the wood, the ash, the smoke, and the smell. There is absolutely zero residue left behind.
Because every last drop of that residue is burned away, a Buddha is totally, completely unshakable. The text gives these wild examples to prove it. A Buddha remains perfectly calm whether they're being showered with 500 vicious insults, framed in fake scandals, attacked by rolling boulders, or literally being charged at by crazed, drunken elephants. Because there is no internal ash left to catch a spark. Literally nothing in the external world can ignite a reaction. They just remain perfectly at peace.
This state of total purity leads to a massive milestone called the Avivartika stage. This is essentially the point of no return. It's this unshakable position where a bodhisattva will absolutely never slide backward into lesser, selfish paths. It is the exact intersection where their profound realization of ultimate emptiness perfectly meets their boundless, overflowing compassion for the entire world.
But interestingly enough, lesser sages are actually terrified of the bodhisattva path. The text shares this great little story about a tree spirit who is just terrified of a tiny pigeon landing on its branch. Why? Because that pigeon might drop a bad seed that eventually grows and chokes out the whole tree. Lesser sages are exactly like that spirit. They've worked so incredibly hard for their inner peace, and they are absolutely terrified of stepping back into the messy, chaotic world to save others because they're afraid of losing that fragile tranquility.
But the true bodhisattva, they navigate this perfectly by balancing two seemingly impossible truths. First, they fully recognize that all dharmas, meaning the world and everything in it, are entirely empty. Second, they realize that even sentient beings themselves are ultimately just an illusion. And third, and this is the real kicker, they still make the active, conscious choice to save everyone anyway, using great compassion.
So I'm going to leave you with this final, incredibly provocative paradox straight from the text. If ultimate wisdom tells us that no one actually exists, and that reality is ultimately just empty space, what does it say about the boundless, almost irrational and beautiful power of great compassion that it willingly walks right into the fire to save them anyway? It's a profound question, and one that completely redefines what it means to be truly wise.